Do you ever look into the real top secret missions declassified by the CIA? Besides Hollywood shows, many covert operation movies, now it's time to see a real one. We're talking top secret stuff that was locked up tighter than Fort Knox until the CIA decided to spill the beans. So prepare for a wild ride on this clandestine caper and uncover what went down at the Bay of Pigs. Let's start. In April 1961, more than 1,000 Cuban exiles embarked on a daring mission to storm the beaches at the Bay of Pigs in an attempt to launch a revolt against Fidel Castro, who had risen to power in the 1950s. This pivotal moment in history marked a significant shift in the relationship between the United States and Cuba, leading to a covert operation authorized by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, continued by President John F. Kennedy, which ultimately ended in a disastrous failure. In the late 1950s, the world watched as Fidel Castro and his determined guerrilla army achieved the impossible, the overthrow of Fulgencio Batista, the US-backed leader of Cuba, on New Year's Day in 1959. The jubilant Cuban people rallied behind Castro, who declared himself the prime minister and assumed control of the nation. For many Cubans, this was a moment of hope and change. Castro's charismatic speeches promised a brighter future, free from the oppressive regimen of Batista. His revolution was initially seen as a triumph for the people, a turning point in their history. However, the situation was viewed with increasing concern across the Florida Straits in the United States. The sudden shift in Cuban leadership marked a pivotal moment in US-Cuba relations. The new Cuban government's alignment with communist ideology and their nationalization of American-owned businesses became a source of tension. The stage was set for a turbulent relationship that would lead to the Bay of Pigs invasion, a significant and unfortunate episode in the ongoing Cold War drama between the United States and Cuba. Castro's decision to link an oil deal with the Soviet Union sent shockwaves through the already tense US-Cuba relations. The Cold War was in full swing, and Cuba's alignment with the Soviet Union was seen as a provocative move. The trouble began when US-owned refineries in Cuba refused to process Soviet oil, causing an economic deadlock. In a defiant act, Castro seized these oil companies, asserting control over this vital sector. This aggressive move not only rattled American interests, but also severed all diplomatic ties between the United States and Cuba. The Cold War had indeed reached the shores of the Caribbean. The situation took another ominous turn as Castro's government began nationalizing American-owned properties, further fueling the simmering tensions. The island nation had become a battleground in the superpower rivalry, with Castro firmly aligning himself with the Soviet Union. The world watched as the stage was set for a tumultuous and enduring standoff between two nations, casting a shadow that would linger for decades. With a communist state just 90 miles from the coast of Florida, President Eisenhower knew he had to take action. The looming presence of Fidel Castro's regime in Cuba was a significant concern for the United States. In a bold move, he authorized the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, to conduct a covert operation aimed at removing Castro from power. The plan was deceptively straightforward. The CIA strategy was to recruit Cuban exiles living in Miami, individuals with a burning desire to see their homeland liberated from communism. These exiles would be meticulously trained in guerrilla warfare, honing their skills for the dangerous mission ahead. The heart of the plan lay infiltrating the Cuban island itself. The objective was to spark an uprising among the Cuban population, rallying them to overthrow Castro's government. It was a high-stakes gamble with the hopes of liberating Cuba from the clutches of communism, and the success of this covert operation would determine the course of history in the region. Amid Cold War tensions, a covert plan was hatched. It was an audacious endeavor aimed at toppling Fidel Castro's communist regime in Cuba. This plan gave birth to Brigade 2506, a gathering of Cuban exiles who were seen as the potential liberators of their homeland. The recruits, filled with patriotic fervor, embarked on a journey that would demand unwavering dedication. These men, many of whom had once called Cuba home, now trained relentlessly on American soil. Some even possessed valuable flying experience, a crucial asset for the impending operation. As the days turned into weeks, their determination remained unshaken. they envisioned themselves as the saviors of their beloved Cuba. Among the recruits, there were double agents secretly working for Castro. The original plan included exiled Cuban pilots infiltrating the Cuban Air Force and sabotaging Castro's air power from within. Simultaneously, the invasion forces were to land in Trinidad, a city known for its anti-communist beliefs and suitable port facilities. As the operation drew near, President Kennedy, who had taken office, became increasingly concerned about the plan's operational security. He made a crucial decision to move the landing site from Trinidad to the Bay of Pigs, which raised eyebrows. The bay was not only one of Castro's favorite vacation spots, but was also surrounded by swampland, making it challenging for locals to join the revolt. On that fateful April 15, 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion, shrouded in uncertainty, continued its ominous march. Exiled Cuban pilots, courageously piloting B-26 bombers from Nicaragua, took off into the skies, their mission clear: to cripple Castro's combat aircraft inventory. Their target was daunting, accounting for roughly 80% of Cuba's air force. Determination was their constant companion in the cockpit, and they pressed forward with unyielding resolve. In the days that followed, as the Cuban skies trembled from the roar of those American-made bombers, Castro's suspicions swirled. The bearded leader sensed these mysterious pilots were not part of his air force. A sense of foreboding enveloped him as he pointed his finger across the Florida Straits, blaming the United States for the aerial assault. He anticipated a more significant, imminent threat, one that could shatter his dreams of a communist utopia in Cuba. In response, Castro issued a somber decree. He called upon the Cuban population to seek shelter, their daily routines disrupted by the looming danger from the north. The chance of an uprising, a spark of resistance, was swiftly extinguished. In the echoing thunder of those B-26s, he charged the United States with arming and training mercenary forces for an impending invasion, setting the stage for the Bay of Pigs to take its treacherous course. The Bay of Pigs invasion was an utter failure. The Cuban exiles were ill-prepared and faced strong opposition from Castro's forces. They found themselves trapped with their supply lines disrupted and air support dwindling. The world watched as the United States failed to support the exiles in their bid to overthrow Castro. The failed invasion not only damaged the reputation of the United States, but also cemented Castro's position in Cuba, making it even more challenging for future attempts to overthrow his regime. The Bay of Pigs became a symbol of Cold War tensions and the struggle for control in the Caribbean. In the end, the events of April 1961 at the Bay of Pigs served as a stark reminder of the complexities and challenges of covert operations, diplomacy, and the pursuit of foreign policy objectives in a rapidly changing world. It was 1961 when the tensions between the United States and Cuba reached a fever pitch. Fidel Castro, a staunch communist, had firmly entrenched himself as the leader of the island nation, much to the chagrin of the United States. President John F. Kennedy felt the need to take action, and he did so with a covert operation known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. In a secret, tense meeting, President Kennedy called upon a force of 200,000 militiamen to undergo intensive training, preparing them for a mission that would soon set the world on edge. Their duty was to overthrow Castro's government in Cuba, a country merely 90 miles away from American shores. As the training of the militiamen began, tensions reached a tipping point when a bombing occurred in Cuba. The Cuban foreign minister promptly convened an emergency meeting at the United Nations. The Cuban government alleged that their nation had been invaded by mercenaries from Guatemala and Florida, pointing fingers at the United States. The United States ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, vehemently denied any U.S. involvement in the attacks. He claimed that the charges were false, effectively placing the blame elsewhere. Stevenson's denial was swift and bold, but it masked a more profound truth. A covert operation was underway. Now aware that the mission had become highly precarious, Kennedy decided to cancel further airstrikes, but not the ground invasion. The fate of Brigade 2506, the group tasked with executing the operation, hung in the balance. On the morning of April 17th, Brigade 2506 sailed toward the Cuban shore, believing they were on the verge of a triumphant return. However, their dreams were quickly dashed as the ocean claimed a significant portion of their weapons and equipment. As they reached the shore, they were met by approximately 20,000 Cuban armed forces, supported by their remaining combat aircraft. Castro's forces sank the invader ships and inflicted heavy casualties, leading Brigade 2506 to spiral towards an epic defeat. Paratroopers missed their targets, equipment was lost, and injuries were widespread. Only a handful managed to barricade roads and hold their positions for 2 days. As the situation deteriorated for Brigade 2506, President Kennedy authorized air support from 6 unmarked U.S. fighter planes on April 19th. However, due to the time change, they arrived an hour late. The consequences of this delay were fatal, as Cuban forces promptly shot down the planes. In the end, approximately 1,200 members of Brigade 2506 were captured, and hundreds were killed. The Bay of Pigs invasion had turned into a colossal failure. President Kennedy was forced to answer for his mistakes, and a settlement was reached to free the prisoners. $53 million worth of baby food was provided. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion had severe consequences for the United States. It dealt a significant blow to President Kennedy's credibility and undermined his domestic and international leadership. It made it increasingly difficult for him to pursue his policy objectives. Furthermore, the invasion emboldened Fidel Castro and the Soviet Union. The humiliation of the U.S. fueled their resolve and increased tensions during the already volatile Cold War. The Bay of Pigs was a cautionary tale of the dangers of covert operations and hasty foreign policy decisions. In the aftermath of the failed invasion, the friends, relatives, and companions of the ill-fated landing at the Bay of Pigs found themselves united once again, but this time in mourning and reflection. The mission filled with hope and ambition had ended in tragedy, leaving an indelible mark on the history of the United States and Cuba. The Bay of Pigs invasion remains a poignant reminder of the complexities and consequences of international politics during the Cold War era. It serves as a testament to the perils of ill-conceived covert operations and the need for careful, considered foreign policy decisions on the global stage. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, hit the bell icon, like, and share our videos for more awesome content.